Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week as the summer starts to flatten out now. Hopefully, temperatures aren't overwhelming you as this is being shot in the summertime. Folks, hope you're having a good day. Today, folks, we want to talk a little bit about the dark night of the soul of your organization, right? We can if you've paid any attention, there's the dark night of the soul, which goes back into ancient times, but also into psychosocial studies and all kinds of things, and even storytelling. If you're a Joseph Campbell fan, as I am, how would you know? Well, the whole motif of Star Wars, for example, and I'm a fan, but I'm not a fanatic. But but that whole motif, uh, I'd say the Star Wars trilogy. I won't say trilogy now, right? But but that just gives you an example. You can do your own little research on Joseph Campbell and storytelling. But the Dark Night of the Soul essentially is when a person, I guess you could say, in modern ways of looking at this, is that you could say where there's a crisis, right? And in the past, it's often been regarded more in the arena of the individual, right? You go through a traumatic event, and the traumatic event forces you to delve inside, right? And look at your part in it and your history and who you are and you're really doing a deep dive into yourself, right? Doing a little bit of self-analysis. And it could take days, months, years, right, for folks to go through this. And the trauma could be anything from family, and life changes, the loss of loved ones, for example, or even divorces. It could be a myriad of things that could trigger it. Oftentimes, in modern times, you've heard of the notion of a midlife crisis. Leave it to all of our culture to cast everything in the darkest light, right? That's just how we are. We're kind of moronic that way, aren't we? Really, it's a midlife awakening, right? What you do with that awakening, that's where the crisis comes in, right? So you can have an awakening and go through periods of trying to figure some things out and actually do a deep dive. But the difficulty is within culture, there's so many distractions, right? And we've talked before about all the isms, the alcoholism, drug, addictions, all these things, right? Could be codependence in relationships, could be codependence, it could be all kinds of things. But it's distractions ultimately. And those distractions are giving you a dopamine hit. And while there can be positive aspects to a dopamine hit to kind of get you excited, like, oh, I'm going to have some, eat a piece of chocolate. Oh, there's a dopamine hit, whatever, right? And not exactly ultimately toxic unless you're eating a lot of chocolate. But if you're doing things to get a dopamine hit, right, to mask taking the still time to do the inward dive to kind of sort through things, right, and figure out, what's working, right? It's kind of like the closet or the garage, right? Think of a garage. It can become cluttered, accumulated, disorganized, and a mess. Well, sometimes our lives can grow to being that. If we don't take care of ourselves, if we're not giving ourselves self-care time to flesh things out, times to figure things out too, right? Put things in their proper context, put them in their proper sequence, get rid of things, right? That are in our garage that we don't need, right? Have the yard sale or the garage sale, right? It's the same idea. It's just an individual is doing it now, and now it's more of an internal inventory. But during that process, there can be a lot of emotional upheaval. There could be a lot of sadness, and there could be a lot of melancholy. Melancholy can really be difficult. You get yourself into some melancholy, turn on some sad songs. Oh my gosh, River of Tears, here you go. And you're on a canoe going down over the waterfall of River of Tears, right? So while it's healthy sometimes to do those things to flush out the system, right? Let those river of tears help to flush out and clean out that garage, right? We also have to be careful we don't overdo it because we can get caught up in cycles of reliving that trauma or not letting ourselves go and to grow and to thrive and to have a joyful life moving forward. To put it in its context and say, hey, this is what it was, this is how it went. Yep, okay, I made a mistake here, they made a mistake there, da 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 da. This is what it was, blah blah blah. And you know what? What did I learn from that? And now how can I take that forward constructively to be a builder of bridges and relations and connections in my life versus one who blows bridges up, right? I guess there are times when you have to blow up some to keep those who are maybe still in a toxic realm on their side of the planet. But for the most part, it's about bridge building, right? That's where forgiveness comes in. Can you truly forgive yourself if you can't forgive others? Not really. And this is where guilt comes in, right? So there's your prelude to the organization, right? It's an individual thing. And quite honestly, even an organization, when you're going through transformation and going, and there's trauma when you gaining and losing a whole lot of employees. Perhaps you've lost certain levels of business or product. We no longer make this product anymore. Anytime there's significant change of leadership, change of ownership, change of location, all kinds of change, even things that could be considered good change, right? Taking on more business, more product lines, more service type, right? Avenues. Even those things can serve as a mechanism that kind of, triggering could be a very sensitive word, activated, right? Because you should see anything that activates you as an opportunity to go, okay, why am I activated by that? To ask the question, right? Act, right? Let me act on to understand, right? In this case, to understand, the action is to understand so that I can take actions to repair what needs to be fixed, clean up what needs to be cleaned up, grow from whatever needs to be grown and lessons learned from, and build the bridge, right? And this is how transformation can take place, right? But organizations can go through their own dark night of the soul through so many of these significant changes, right? And oftentimes it's difficult to get through this change. Individuals can go to counselors, right? Can go to therapists, right? Even group versions of this for, say, families or couples and so on, right? So, but in organizations, what do we typically do? Well, a lot of times we'll look for outside help with, say, a consultant to kind of, hey, we need help getting organized. Well, that's fantastic. And getting organized and getting streamlined and identifying some things that aren't working are great. That's definitely a significant piece of that pie. But your organization also needs to do a deep dive on themselves as a team, right? Because you're not going to grow as a team until you learn how to heal as a team. I know that sounds a little squishy to some folks. Some people are activated by by that kind of thought process or that approach. But folks, I'm telling you, if your heart and your head aren't in tandem, working together throughout your entire team, you're just going to be ever chasing these distractive efforts to put a Band-Aid fix on situations. Meanwhile, underlying, people are never getting past the traumas that are happening, potentially constantly, because you're overlooking them, right? You may be in a constant state of storming. The phase, there's forming, storming, norming, and performing. You're in a constant state of storming. Well, what is that? You're in a constant state of mid or mild level trauma, right? It's constant coming and going of people in and out of your organization. Drama, right? Drama and toxicity, communication. People aren't getting along, right? People aren't, there isn't a team cohesion because you're not actively approaching these things and actively working to heal and grow from these things and grow these things into a better state. Then you are naturally going to be what? Falling off. You're naturally going to be subsiding. think of it like a bird. If a bird has to flap its wings to keep going, yeah, it can flap and build momentum, catch some wind here and there, right? And which will help take it aloft, right? It's reading its surroundings. It's using the environment in conjunction with its own efforts. That's normal, but it has to be in a company of that. It can't stop. When it stops, it will absolutely then what? Descend slowly or quickly, it will descend. And it's no different with organizations. If you're not flapping, if you're not flapping those wings, right? Every one of you, a critical feather on those wings, right? Leadership and ownership, using their vision to see out. What do we see? What's going on? What's the lay of the land? And taking care of their wings, right? Making sure they're clean of parasites and clean of any kind of obstructions, anything that's going to hurt or harm the team, right? The feathers in this case, that allows it to what? Gain altitude. You're not gaining altitude. A bird without wings will no quicker gain altitude than ownership or leadership without a team. Okay? You are exactly a rat. You're just a rat or a mouse, whatever you want to consider yourself, right? If you want to call yourself a rodent of some sort, fine, whatever. But you're not a bird. You're not a bird, right? A bird has wings. A bird can gain altitude. A bird can get aloft using its wings, right? And those wings working in concert, right? That gets you somewhere. And it's no different with your team, folks. It's no different with your entire organization, right? So you need to understand that your organization is going to go through and is likely end. Look, folks, this is just experiential, the data I've looked at in the past and so on and so forth. If you just look at the US, if our effectivity at best is 70%, right? Because you got to remember all the gimmicks and all the write-offs and all the things, right? If our best performance is 70%, and stats show that organizations are underreporting their total capacity, because only your total capacity, the total work you could do, right? We're showing that it's in a 30%. So that's trauma, folks. That is national trauma. So how do you reverse that national trauma? You got to own it. The only way to own going forward and to heal is to own, right? Everybody has to own their thing. Their team has to own their stuff, has to own, hey, how do we get here? And it can't be this blame game. Oh, somebody else. It's always somebody else. Look, folks, we are where we are because people have done that for generations. It has been a reflex. It is its own ism, right? It's the scapegoat, right? There's always somebody looking for the scapegoat. Oh, it was the new employee. Oh, it was the last leader. It was the new or the last owner. It was so and so. It was da 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 da. No, everybody has to own their part. Why? Because everybody, if we're not fixing the thing, right? If we're not fixing the thing, by default, we're breaking the thing, right? If we're not flapping the wings, by default, we're descending, right? So this is why, this is reality. Hit the reality button, right? The red reality button and go, reality says as a team, we have to own our stuff, and you might be a new organization. You might be less than 10 years old. You might be less than 5 years old. You may still be developing bad habits. Do you have mechanisms in place, right, to be able to handle some things so that there isn't this, right, scapegoat thing going on, right? Is the drama and toxicity, right? Reindeer games, as we used to call them, when I was coming up. We can't be playing reindeer games looking for a Rudolph to blame all the time, right? So, it was this, and that those reindeer games, by the way, folks, can also be machinery. It can be software. It can be computers. We can blame everything, but never own our part. And that really is where it has to begin. It has to begin with us owning our part. If we don't own our part, We can't grow out of it, right? And we also, when we own our part, we're giving others permission to own their part. And then when we get in that, it becomes so much easier to own it. It's just so much easier to own it, and then you can build healthy, a healthy foundation on top of that firm honesty, right? You can build trust on that firm honesty, right? To say, hey, I'm not perfect, right? I have foibles, I have faults. I've screwed up at times and I didn't bring my best on a particular day here or there, whatever, right? Insert scenario as you will. To own that and say, you know what, I can get better. And I want to get better. Hey, how about you guys? Right? Most people in our culture would rather run into, a really awful scenario. I'm just going to leave that vague. I don't want to paint any ugly pictures, but run into any awful scenario or eat their worst food ever, right? Versus ever owning that they could have ever have made a mistake. And because of that, pride and ego has now become the idol you now worship. And if pride and ego is that thing that you now worship, then guess what? You're never going to own it. It's not going to heal, and you're not going to be able to build a bridge. You're just not. Because what? You're masking everything with a dopamine hit. Now, in this case, it's a distractive dopamine hit, but it's a dopamine hit just the same. And it then becomes an addiction. And people are addicted not taking responsibility. They're addicted to throwing somebody else under the bus. There are people who won't speak up because they're afraid that they'll be thrown under the bus. Now, we have to break that chain. We have to break this whole being thrown under the bus scenario, right? And that's just something that people would say, in days of yore. Basically hanging somebody else out for the scapegoat, making somebody the scapegoat. That's essentially what we're saying. It's like, look, they would rather do that than own their part. And that's sad. And that's part of the reason why our effectiveness, especially in the United States, where all of my data and research is at, shows us to be as ineffective as we are. Our GDP is absolutely in the toilet, right? And you might say, oh, our GDP is pretty good. Really? Well, when you look at and you factor out all our ineffectiveness, we're probably throwing between a quarter and a third of it right down the toilet, folks. And what does that mean? That means that prices, our economy is suffering. Prices skyrocket. People can't survive as easily as they once did. And right on down the line, the economics influence everything else, right? And then the social structure gets fragmented because what? Families don't have as much time together because everybody's running hither and yon just to survive. Next thing you know, people are, crossing lines they would never cross just to survive. And we should never have a culture like that, a culture that has to contemplate doing nefarious things, right? Versus doing upright, organized and we'll say legal things, right? We have a culture. I mean, just look at all of our culture and look at how much goes on because of what? Because of our economy. Our economy is in the toilet, folks, and we can't pretend like it's not by, fluffy talk and happy talk. We are a traumatized country. We've been traumatized for generations, and part of the way we've dealt with that trauma is to create scapegoats along the way, and everybody has probably experienced this at one stage or another in your life, where you were blamed for something that that never occurred or whatever, right? And it could be micro to the macro. It could be big stuff, it could be little stuff, right? But you add all that up, what is it? It's not taking ownership and accountability. It's not owning it. You can't forgive it, grow through it, heal it, and become better for it unless you can own it, folks. I'm just telling you, and this is why teams need to come together. All right, folks. Remember, dark night of the soul in your organization, the way to overcome it to begin with is to own it and to make it possible in your organizations for your team to own things without any kind of retribution for doing so, right? And owning their part, right? Letting folks own their part. Let the team as a whole say, hey, this is where we could have been better. This is where we've not done well, right? And and uh, and then from that state of owning it and being honest, then you can build a firmer foundation, build that trust, start building some cohesiveness. All right. All right, folks. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more, right? To uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When we do this, not only helping to transform culture, but we're transforming ourselves in the process. And that's an important thing. Never take it for granted. All right, folks. Have a good one. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.